On the day before Gu Kai and Lin Ji processed their divorce, Lin Ji also had an affair, following Gu Kai's lead. They had been married for less than 2 years, and Gu Kai had an affair during this time, which had been eating at Lin Ji. She wanted to get back at him, but she hadn't found the right person. Later, she met John Su, and she thought he was the one. Lin Ji and Gu Kai were high school classmates and met again after college through a blind date. They both felt a connection and got married after a year of being together. Lin Ji thought they would live happily ever after, but less than 2 years into their marriage, she discovered Gu Kai's affair when she was just 1 month pregnant. The pain and despair led Lin Ji to give up on the baby growing inside her. She didn't want the child to be born into such an uncertain family. Afterward, Gu Kai continued his affair without restraint, and their marriage became insignificant to him. Lin Ji knew that divorce was inevitable, and she felt frustrated, depressed, and angry with no way to vent her feelings. One weekend, she wandered the streets aimlessly, and by chance, she saw Gu Kai entering a coffee shop with another woman. She followed them inside. The best peeking spot was undoubtedly sitting back to back with Gu Kai, where she could both observe and eavesdrop. However, that seat was already taken by a man. Lin Ji boldly went over and sat down, signaling the man to be quiet. Throughout the encounter, Lin Ji strained her ears but couldn't make out the conversation. After Gu Kai and the woman left, Lin Ji planned to go but found the man, John Su, leisurely watching her. John Su was that man. That day, to show her gratitude, Lin Ji paid the bill, and they exchanged WeChat contacts. Before meeting John Su, Lin Ji had been a typical married woman, cautious and living her life meticulously. At 28, her life was pure and straightforward. However, everything changed after she met John Su. John Su made her understand what kind of happiness a woman should have, but at the same time, he entangled her in a way that she couldn't break free. Chatting with John Su on WeChat started casually, but day by day, Lin Ji realized she had underestimated him. He talked about art, music, and life without hesitation, and his humor and wit captivated her. Unknowingly, Lin Ji started to enjoy chatting with John Su and his subtle teasing. It was as if a feather was brushing against her heart, making it tickle with desire. When John Su invited her to meet, Lin Ji hesitated only briefly. She had already been informed by Gu Kai that they would go to the civil affairs office the next day to divorce. Lin Ji thought, why not John Su? He's so handsome, and I'm not losing anything. That night left a deep impression on Lin Ji. John Su's intense gaze made her heart race, and when he held her hand and said he loved her, his deep affection left her powerless. Before this, Lin Ji had never experienced such intense emotions. Her life had always been routine, school, work, and meeting the right person to marry. She thought she had experienced love with Gu Kai, but when John Su's lips touched hers, she realized that what she had felt before wasn't love at all. True love was a happiness worth burning for, even if it left you screaming. That night, Lin Ji would never forget. It was the night she truly understood the happiness of being a woman. John Su didn't spare his praise. He complimented Lin Ji's figure, praised her smooth skin, and when her body froze and she didn't know where to put her hands and feet, he gently guided them to the right places, leading her to new heights of pleasure. Most importantly, he flattered her sensuality, saying she had given him the most astonishing pleasure. Lin Ji knew he was exaggerating, but it felt so good. As a married woman, she had never been treated this way in bed. Her husband, Gu Kai, often complained that she was too passive and not passionate enough. He even left her in the middle of the act, making her feel humiliated. But Jeon-soo was completely different. He praised her enthusiastically and sensually taught her how to please herself. When he sensed she was slightly slower in feeling pleasure, he stopped and waited for her to reciprocate, as if his goal was to give her the utmost satisfaction. After the passion, lying in his arms, Lin-ji realized that this was the life a woman should enjoy. The next day, at the Civil Affairs office, Lin-ji managed to control her facial expressions. She signed the divorce papers with a feeling of relief and the excitement of starting a new life. Jeon-soo wasn't surprised by Lin-ji's divorce. He had already witnessed the unhappiness in her marriage. Regarding Lin-ji's divorce, Jeon-soo's attitude was that they were both adults and everyone should take responsibility for their actions. Whether Lin-ji divorced or not, it was her choice. Indeed, Lin-ji's divorce had nothing to do with Jeon-soo. Before she met him, her marriage with Goo Kai was already on the rocks. But Jeon-soo turned her divorce into a happy event. She could hold Jeon-soo's hand proudly in the sunlight, just like any couple in love, eager for everyone to see her happiness. Lin-ji introduced Jeon-soo to all her friends with joy and happiness. He not only made her understand the taste of love but also introduced her to the concept of sexual happiness. Lin-ji and Jeon-soo spent 3 passionate months together. During that time, she was the only one for him. But only for those 3 months. When Lin-ji discovered Jeon-soo's involvement with other women, she almost broke down and lost the composure she had when she found out about her husband's affair. It seemed that this was the difference between deep and shallow love. Faced with Lin-ji's anger, Jeon-soo shrugged. He said it was his way of life, he liked it and could never resist beautiful women. He compared himself to a butterfly, flitting from one flower to another, needing the nectar of many flowers to nourish him. A few words had hit the mark in a woman's heart. An experienced man in bed, Lin-ji knew he had been with many women, but she hoped she would be his last, sharing love and passion for the rest of their lives. It was all just wishful thinking. Those solemn declarations of love, those promises as deep as the sea, were just tools he used to make her happy, not to make her believe in them. Lin-ji looked at his handsome face, slapped him, and said one word, "Get lost." He obeyed and went away, allegedly on a trip to Yunnan with another girl. But Lin-ji felt as if her backbone had been torn out. Lin-ji couldn't sleep at night, lost her appetite, and always thought of Jeon-soo. She remembered the passionate nights with him, and without him, life felt dull. In less than a month, Lin-ji surrendered. She dialed Jeon-soo's number and said, "I miss you. When are you coming back?" Jeon-soo returned, and they passionately went to bed as if nothing had happened. Just over 2 weeks later, Jeon-soo left again, sending Lin-ji a WeChat message saying he had to attend an old classmate's wedding in Hangzhou. Lin-ji knew he was lying because she had seen his chat records, showing he had been invited to the Maldives by another woman. A month later, he returned as if nothing had occurred. This time, Lin-ji went mad, shouting and telling him to leave. From a young age, Lin-ji had been taught to love with dignity, and Jeon-soo's love made her lose her dignity. But when Jeon-soo truly left, she couldn't help but hold on to him tightly. Lin-ji was divorced at 27 and, without realizing it, was still entangled with Jeon-soo at the age of 30. During this time, they were on and off continuously. Lin-ji couldn't stand his involvement with other women, but she would surrender with just one look or sweet word from him. Her parents knew about her relationship with Jeon-soo and advised her to cut all ties with him because he couldn't provide her with lifelong happiness. All he could give her was temporary pleasure. But this temporary pleasure felt addictive, and she was trapped in it, unable to escape. One moment, she was determined to break free from him, and the next moment, she was surrendering in his arms. Every time after their passion, she despised herself for becoming like this. The happiness she once longed for was slipping further away, and all she had left was sexual happiness, shared with other women. At her best friend's baby's full moon celebration, Linji couldn't help but envy and resent her friend's happiness. She said, "Why does happiness only favor you?" Her friend replied, "You should have listened to me and cut ties with Jeon-soo long ago, found someone to marry seriously. Maybe by now, you'd also be a mother." The first time Linji had an abortion due to Jeon-soo, her friend had advised her to cut all ties with him. She said, "Jeon-soo isn't the right choice for you. He can make you incredibly happy, but he can make you incredibly miserable as well. The longer you're with him, the more you'll suffer." Linji smiled bitterly. Everyone understood the logic, but look at all the women who suffered for love and marriage. She was just one of them. After discovering her unexpected pregnancy once again, Linji told Jeon-soo. He simply said, "Oh," and then added, "Find time to go to the hospital. I'm quite busy at the moment. Take care of yourself." Even though it was the expected response, and she knew he couldn't give her what she wanted, on a June day, Linji still felt a chill. Lying on the cold operating table, Linji knew that Jeon-soo wasn't that busy. He was just accompanying a new colleague from his workplace to go mountain climbing, wearing the outfit she had bought for him. After the surgery, the doctor emphasized to Linji, "Girl, next time, you must carry the baby. You can't undergo another abortion." In reality, she did want to sever all ties with Jeon-soo rationally. She was tired of their on-and-off relationship, but she couldn't resist his sweet words. Linji told herself it was time to end it all. She applied for a transfer within the company and proactively went to a remote city to explore new markets. She changed her phone number, deactivated her old WeChat, and immersed herself in work in an unfamiliar place. During this time, she missed Jeon-soo, remembering the passionate embraces and kisses. However, more often, she remembered his callousness. A year later, Linji returned. After a few days, Jeon-soo waited for her downstairs at the company. She smiled at him and walked past. She walked past him. She had walked past him. That was it. Choosing to let go or to entangle oneself is just a thought away. One thought can be heaven, and the next can be hell. When you suddenly realize it, you begin to live more soberly. At the beginning, Linji hated Jeon-soo, but later, she realized she was the one to blame and felt foolish. His bad and cold behavior was there for everyone to see, and he hadn't forcibly held on to her. It was all her own doing. A woman's unhappiness and suffering don't result from meeting a bad man, it's because after encountering an unsuitable man, she doesn't choose to leave. If a man treats you badly or is simply not right for you, and you can't leave him, then you have no one to blame but yourself. Happy women aren't those who've never encountered bad men, they are the ones who, after facing an unsuitable man, decisively turn around, continue to live life fully, and still experience sweet love in the next chapter.